Hello and welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about a decision-making process that has worked for me in the past and something that I've refined over time. Just a useful tool because I've asked quite a few people this question. I asked them, do you have decisions are important, right? And certain decisions are very, very consequential to your life. Do you have a process that you follow to make those important decisions? And almost invariably the answer is well, initially it's yes. Yes, I do have a process. But then when you try to inquire about the process, that kind of falls apart. There's no real process there other than intellectually going through the process of, summing up the pros and the cons. And there's nothing wrong with that. And the way that what I mean to say when I say there's nothing wrong with that is there's nothing wrong with that layer, intellectual layer, but it has to be used in combination, in my opinion, it has to be used in combination with a series of other suggested answers that your body and mind and surroundings can provide you. So we know that we have this inbuilt thing called intuition, when we sort of instinctively know something is either right or wrong. And so straight away, maybe there's certain decisions where you'll just make your decision based on an instinctual sort of feeling, but instinct is just another part of this whole. So let me just quickly framework this for you. This is incorporating the intuition, the intellect, the mind, and then the body. The body is what you'd call maybe the emotional layer. So without sort of thinking too much about what it is that you're feeling, you ask your body the question. And then finally, a rationalization where you look at the answers as objectively as you can, try to separate yourself from the end result and come up with the best possible solution or the best possible answer to any question that you're asking. So let's start, okay? In order to use your intuition, which is the first step of this process, you really want to try to clear your mind as much as possible. So what am I talking about there? It's basically like a small meditation, if you will. Think about when you just take a couple of conscious breaths, for example, where you just sort of stop everything and you just say, breathe in and out, a nice exhale, a real sort of let the bags that you're carrying just fall to the floor and relax, even for 10 to 20 seconds we're talking about. And if it's a more important decision, I would suggest that you do a little bit more of that before you hit your intuition. So then what you do is you ask the intuition the question that you're asking. What is X? Whatever it is, whatever the question is, what should I do here? Ask the instinct, and the instinct is going to just give you a boom, this is what the answer is. There's value in that, right? There's a reason that we have intuition, and intuition is there to be used as a tool. So what you do with that instinctual answer is you don't say, okay, this is me, I'm doing this, this is what my instinct tells me to do, and just go ahead and go ahead with it. But no, that's not what you do. You take that as a suggested answer. So a suggested answer number one from your instinct, let's say, is a yes, right? Do it or proceed or whatever. The next step is to now go to your brain, go to the grey matter, go to the intellect. And here is where you utilize those if you need to put a list down in the pros and the cons and just weigh up all the pros and the cons to a decision, the potential consequences that you might have to, I guess, go through as a result of the choice that you make. This is the layer probably that's going to take the longest, right? And it's the layer that ultimately your brain has to sort of bend itself to try and achieve an outcome for you. And ultimately, you're going to come to the end of that process and you're going to have suggested answer number 2. It's very easy at that point to just say, well, there's nothing else that could override my brain, right? But you forget how intelligent the body is, right? The body has the number of systems that run in the body completely separate to your conscious awareness, your frontal lobe of your brain, the part of your brain that is responsible for that intellectual analysis that you did of the question. The amount of intelligence that is encapsulated within the body is remarkable, is absolutely gobsmacking. So you go to the body, and the body is going to respond in a very specific way when you ask it this question. You have to try to switch your mind off. You have to try to imagine that in a way like you're brain dead, right? And all you're doing is you're asking the question and you're just listening to your body. You're listening for an answer. You're not suggesting an answer. You're not interpreting. You're not doing anything at this point. Not even interpreting. You're just listening. And what happens is, see, I believe, this isn't scientifically proven, but I believe that the body, on top of the fact that it's remarkably intelligent, it's also an antenna. It's an antenna that connects you to the universe at large, because your brain only connects to the universe at large through the medium of the body. The eyes, the sensations, they all feed that energy up into the brain. So the brain doesn't have direct contact with the world, but the body does. It's the body's job to navigate you through this world. And as a result of that, I believe that the body picks up on waves or energy or whatever that are carrying a signal. And when you ask the question and you listen to the body for the answer, usually this is what happens for me. A deep sensation, emotion, feeling, call it what you will, happens in a particular part of the body. So it could be right up near your throat where you're thinking to yourself, it's either a pleasant or a not pleasant feeling, but you understand the sensation, the energy that it is trying to communicate to you. For example, once I asked a question and I had this pain in my stomach, and the pain in my stomach basically immediately overrode both my instinct and my intellect, because I knew that it wasn't the right decision and I had to keep moving and say no to that question that I asked. I just knew immediately. And in fact, there's so much information encapsulated when you ask the body that you receive rationales for the decision as well. So it's not like you have to try to interpret this feeling and give it your own meaning. No, it comes encapsulated with a fully furnished rationale. Sometimes, I'll say, sometimes, when the body is very clearly trying to tell you something. So once you understand what the body is saying, then you have suggested answer number 3. And we have gone to the intellect. We've started at the instinctual layer. We've gone to the intellect layer, and then we've gone to the body. And the last step is to bring all of that together back to the brain and, I guess, rank these results in importance. Because, for example, in that one situation where I had that very visceral reaction when I went to the body, I immediately knew that neither of the first 2 answers were legitimate at that point. That's all I needed as soon as I went to the body. And it's interesting as well. For example, right, I've run this as a test sometimes when I'm hungry, for example, right? Or sometimes when I'm asking a question about what I should do at work. And those 2 scenarios are so vastly different that what happens is you end up understanding over time which of your faculties, whether it's the instinct or the intellect or the body, that will give you the best answer for the question that you're trying to ask. But you won't know that until you actually run this process yourself a few times. So let's go through it very quickly again. Blank your mind. So at least 10 to 20 seconds of pure meditation where all you're doing is you're just paying attention to the breath, taking a few slow, deep breaths, and then you ask the question. The aim is to catch your instinct unawares, so that as close to unaware as possible. So the question comes out of the blue, so to speak. That's the point. That's the aim of this, is like to hit your instinct when it's not expecting a question. That's why you meditate a little bit. Listen for the answer and just snap to that's the answer that you get and lock it in. Because with instinct, I will say one thing. With instinct, it's often the case that you second guess yourself. And you need to learn not to do that. You need to learn to ask the question, receive the answer, and then be prepared to move on. This is a training exercise. Think about it. We know that there's people out there that just instinctively act, and they're very, very good at that. But the way that they get tuned into that, it's quite difficult. And this is a method by which you can train your intuition. So you ask the question, the instinct comes, you answer it, and you move on. Now, because what happens is, later on, once you go through the intellectual layer and the body layer, you can measure your response for the instinct. And you can say, wow, my instinct was really out on this. So what happens is, over time, once you run this process a few times and you're finding, for example, that the instinct is not in tune with what the correct answers should be, over time, what I have found anyway, is that the instinct starts to learn how to give you useful information. So you ask the question and you receive that answer. And sometimes you know that that's the right choice. You still run the process. You go through the intellectual layer, you go to the body, you ask the question, but you just know. And you can't, I feel like that's one of the only ways to train your instincts, is to actually put your instincts to the test. The intellectual layer, I mean, we're operating in a mental world, right? Like we once you have that instinctual answer and you go to the intellect, you're really running the program of the world through your mind. We should be very good at this by now. Most people only rely on the intellect to make decisions. That's why, to be honest, I don't really want to spend a lot of time on this layer, because almost certainly most people are making their decisions based on a very quick, rudimentary intellectual conversation in their brains. They're saying, if I don't do this, this is going to happen. But maybe then they'll go to another layer and they'll say, but if I do it, then X and X, whatever. And very quickly after having a conversation like that with themselves, they'll make a decision. They have not used all of the resources at their disposal to make that decision. This is a way for you to use all of those resources. Then you go to the body. The body is the antenna, is the true intelligence. It's at least 50% of your intelligence is tied up in your body. Go to the body. Listen for the answer. And finally, the rationalization. So again, we're ranking, we're trying to understand which of these suggested answers is the correct answer. Let me say this. I have come to the end of a rationalization and decided against the majority, or against what I thought, what my faculties told me was the correct choice. And the reason why is because sometimes a choice, I believe, just doesn't quite fit into the dynamics of the world that we live in. So I'm going to use a hypothetical here, because I don't really want to discuss the decisions that I've made out of this. But let's say, for example, if you were trying to work out whether you should rob a bank, right? Well, if there is a possible outcome where your instinct and your intellect and your body tells you that it's the right thing to do, but you know, once you get to that rationalization layer, that you should put a stop to this. Now, look, that is quite a far out case, okay? Obviously, I don't assume that anybody's going to run this process to work out whether they should rob a bank or not. One of the elements that is the most vague in terms of a suggested answer are relationships. You can ask a question about a friend that you might want to continue seeing, or perhaps try to get out of your life, or potentially a partner that you want to be with or maybe not want to be with. And the suggested answers that you get back for these sorts of questions are vague. And I think the reason for that is because the ultimate choice for those types of decisions are matters for the soul. And the soul is something that has eluded me, how to ask the soul a question. I don't know. Maybe you do. Maybe you have a better solution to this. Maybe there is another layer which is for the soul. But I have found that when I run this for interpersonal relationships, the answers are usually not as distinct as the practical day-to-day answers that you might need regarding work, regarding diet, regarding exercise, regarding generally how to live your life. Those types of answers come very distinct. So give it a go and leave me some comments. I'd love to hear from you guys. See, if you wanted to run it just on a simple, so just on, like, if you wanted to really just practice this, which is what I did initially, run this process every time you're not certain whether you should eat or not. So if you're thinking about getting something to eat or not getting something to eat, run this process, because there is where you'll get your like very, very clear answers. And you'll know, if you don't know how to identify whether you're hungry or not, run this process. Good practice. It's a good practice, but certainly then you can escalate it and start taking on some slightly larger decisions, like at work, and potentially even switching roles or whatever you're sort of looking at that time. Thank you, and I will see you guys on the next video.